Hey guys, this is Toby Mathis, and today we're going to go over a very simple question, which is the difference between an IRA and a 401k, what you can do in one and what you can't do in one, things like that. We're just going to do a quick comparison. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell notification icon so you know when a new video is uploaded. Tax laws are changing all the time. The laws are changing all the time. That's why you're first to know, you're first to grow. So number one, let's be very, very clear. When we talk about an IRA, we're talking about an individual retirement account. Individual actually means something. So the I means me. I'm an individual versus a 401k, which is sponsored by a company. And so they do fall under different sections of the code, and they do have different rules. And the most important things is to figure out what those differences are. So let's just kind of go through. I'm going to really hit on 7 of them. But the first one is this thing called UDFI. Oops, where did I put my little thingy here? So we're going to say UDFI, which is unrelated debt financed income, and then we also have unrelated business income tax, UBIT. Why are those things so important? It becomes really important because you have UDFI in a 401k. You only have it in an IRA, and this is really important. And what it really means is that if I get financing on an asset that's inside of an IRA, so let's say I buy real estate inside of an IRA, and I get financing on it, I'm going to have to pay tax on the portion of the income that is derived from the debt. So if I buy a $200,000 house and half of the house is debt, I'm paying tax on half of the income that's being generated. That does not happen in a 401k. So a 401k on that one gets a little check, so you look at it and say, geez, that's a pretty big difference. And this gets even more important when you're actually investing in syndication and things like that. If they have underlying debt, then it should pass through to the holding entity. So if you have an IRA and it's investing in something like a private investment of some sort and that it's financed with debt, you could be looking at a pretty sizable tax hit that you just don't even know exists out there. The other one is unrelated business income tax, which is if I run a business that is not related to the exempt purpose and underneath an exception, it is taxable. So the easiest way to look at this is if you have a brick and mortar business and it's making money and you do that inside of a retirement plan, you're going to have to pay tax on that. Now, if you are a passive investor in a business, then that's an exception. And so we look at things like rents and interest and things like that. Like I could loan money in an IRA or a 401k, I don't have to worry about the tax. But if I set up a new business and do it inside of an IRA, I'm going to be paying tax on it. If I do it inside of a 401k, then I'm going to be paying tax on it, unless you fall under something called a IRA'S transaction, which is rollover as a business startup, in which case you're partnering not as a disqualified person. You understand, you're actually partnering ahead of time. You're not doing transactions continuously. You're funding it once and it's a shareholder. There's a way to do it. I'm not going to confuse you. But just know that those two issues out there, the biggest difference is UDFI does not happen to a 401k. Number 2 is loans. I can loan money from either entity or from either an IRA or a 401k. I can loan money to unrelated parties, but I'm allowed to loan money to myself in a 401k. I cannot loan myself money in an IRA. So I'm going to say, hey, check. I can loan myself up to $50,000 per participant. So it's $50,000 paid back over 5 years. So if I want to, for example, borrow money from a 401k and fund an IRA, I can actually do that. If I need a quick loan and I need it for 6 months to a year, I could borrow it right out of my 401k, up to $50,000. Married couple, you're looking at $100,000. It's capped at 50% of your plan assets. So if you have, say, what's a good number, 30,000 in my plan, I can borrow up to half of that, 15,000, capped at 50,000. So it's 50%, so it's $15,000. So I could borrow $15,000 tomorrow, pay it back over 5 years, and I'm paying interest to myself. Another big one is we have some income limitations on what we can use to put money into an IRA. So for example, I may have a set limit, like I might have $6,000 a year that I can put into an IRA, but if I make too much, I can't. If I'm trying to do a Roth IRA, then I have phase outs and things like that. So that's not the case with the 401k. 401k, you can make as much money as humanly possible, and you could put in a lot more. So for example, I think it's $19,000 to $56,000. I can defer the first $19,000 of my income, and I can put in or the company can match up to 25% of my salary, up to $56,000 per 401k, by the way. So if you have an employer 401k, you can still have another company that's with a spouse or with yourself, and you can be contributing more money into that one as well. So the contribution amounts are significantly higher, and there's no wage limitation. Like I can put money into a Roth 401k, and I don't have to worry about how much money I'm making. I can just do it. I can just defer, or I'm not even deferring income. I'm just putting income in there after tax dollars. Another big issue is, so we're going to call that one amounts. And I'm going to give a little check over there. The next one is prohibited transactions, and what happens, your penalties. So go through a couple situations. So let's say that I have an IRA and I have two pieces of property in it. I'm not supposed to use my personal labor to improve the value of that property. So let's say I go down there and paint it, and that's a clear prohibited transaction, and I just disqualified my IRA. Let's say I had two houses, each worth $100,000. My disqualification is the entire IRA. So I would have a $200,000 tax hit, penalty and tax. Now let's go through the same situation, but I'm in a solo 401k or a 401k. I have two pieces of property in there. This time I paint a property, it disqualifies that asset. I have a $100,000 distribution. Not $200,000, it's literally, it cuts the penalty in half. And so those are little differences. If you're doing anything that is even borderline on the edge, then your 401k becomes a much more forgiving plan. A lot of folks, if they're doing things like properties, somebody's going to tell you, A, have them in an LLC inside the retirement plan, and you may want to have two IRAs, one for each property. All right, next thing. Let's just talk about control. So my control becomes much easier when I have a 401k, because I could be my own trustee. In an IRA, I'm always going to have a custodian, even when you're doing a self-directed IRA. So typically what happens is, let's say I put money in TD Ameritrade, open up an IRA. Their plan documents are going to dictate what you can put money into. It's going to end up being things that TD Ameritrade allows you to do, like brokerage accounts and things like that. They're able to make money. Now let's say I go to self-directed IRA custodian. So I go to one of the biggies, and they're going to just say, hey, we don't care what you do in it. It's no skin off our nose. You can do whatever you want. There's no prohibition on, for example, buying real estate inside of an IRA. But TD Ameritrade won't let you buy real estate in it because they're not getting paid on it. So they're going to say, forget it. So you need to pay them directly. So you're going to be paying custodian fees. Now, you still have to have the custodian put in the offers and close all the documents. Plus, you can't put all the money into a single account. So let's say that I'm buying a piece of property, and it's husband and wife, and they each have $100,000, and they're buying a $100,000 piece or $200,000 piece of property. It takes one 401k to do that. It takes two IRAs to do that. If you have an IRA, you have to operate through a custodian. If you do a 401k, you could be your own trustee. You could actually be writing the check. And this is really important. For example, if you're putting in offers over the weekends, things like that, you need to be able to put in an offer. You can't do it as an IRA. You have to do it as a 401k. You need to actually have checkbook control. There are ways to work around IRAs to get checkbook control. For example, you could have it own an LLC, and then you manage the LLC. You just have to be very careful. Make sure you're drafting those agreements very specifically for that purpose, because there's disqualifications that'll cause you to get penalties and bad tax hits if you don't know what you're doing when you're drafting up that operating agreement. You got to use a professional for it. All right. Next one, number 6, we'll just call it investments. And we're going to give ourselves, by the way, another check on that one. Investments. So when you have an IRA, again, you have certain companies that are going to say, here's the things that you can invest in. So for example, if I go to a TD Ameritrade, I can do mutual funds, I can do ETFs, I could do stocks and bonds and things like that. But can I do Bitcoin? Can I do real estate? Can I do precious metals? The answer is going to be, depending on their agreements, it's going to be no. So you're going to want to have your own 401k or your own trustee so you're able to do that. Or you're going to want to do a self-directed IRA. Now here's a big difference when it comes to things like precious metals. I cannot take physical possession of precious metals in an IRA. If anybody ever tells you that you can, they're not being straightforward with you. It's not true. You have to use a bank or a bank equivalent. If I do a 401k, I can take actual possession of it. So it's actually much nicer. But there are restrictions on what you can and cannot take possession of. So for example, I'm probably going to be doing government issued coins if I am doing something along those lines of doing precious metals. All right, last one, and we'll just call it my dog has fees. By the way, that gave us another check. And the seventh one is going to be a big check too to the 401k. I mean, these things aren't really close when you get down to it. Here, let me make sure that you guys can see that. When we are looking at putting fees onto it, you want to make sure that you can avoid some of the costs. When you're looking at brokerage houses and things like that control assets, or if you have a custodian, you're generally looking at about, I think the average is a little over 2% on an industry average. If you do your own 401k, you're your own trustee, there's no cost. And so if you are going to do self-directed transactions, if you're doing ones or twos and it's low value, yeah, you could probably get by with the IRAs. If you're doing something heavy and you're doing many hundreds of thousands, then I would probably say you may want to be looking at a 401k and becoming your own trustee, so you're not having to pay somebody to do all these transactions, because they will nickel and dime you. It's no skin off. I mean, I don't hold it against them because they have to get paid for their time, and it might be better to put that burden onto you and let you be responsible, so you can be your own trustee on many of these plans. Anyway, that's the difference between an IRA and a 401k. For you guys that, especially those of you who are involved in real estate, I'm probably going to be pushing you towards the 401k. Again, I'm not saying IRAs are bad. In fact, I'm not saying you have to use either or. I'm saying is that certain transactions are going to lend themselves more towards a 401k. You might still have an IRA out there, for example. We can actually get over $50,000 a year into a Roth IRA through the use of a self-directed 401k. I'm not going to spoil it for you today. I'm just going to say that there's some things that you can do. You need both at the end of the day, but it's kind of like any toolbox. You can pick up a hammer and it's really good for driving nails, but if you try to screw something in with it, it's not going to work. You got to have the right tool for the job. And again, it comes down to working with a good advisor who understands the differences. So give us a call if you have any questions, or if you want to make sure that you're using the right tool for whatever you're trying to accomplish.